The Rascals, yes, former Impact Wrestling stars, the Rascals, at least two of them have signed with WWE. It's something we covered here on the channel a couple of weeks ago. Once they departed Impact Wrestling several weeks ago, there were all sorts of rumours and reports stating that the Rascals were indeed headed to WWE. By all accounts, they had essentially an open offer from WWE to sign whenever they felt like, and once their Impact contract expired, they had signed with WWE. At least two of them have, because WWE has announced that the latest WWE Performance Center class includes Dezmond, Xavier and Zachary Wentz, formerly known as Impact Wrestling stars, the Rascals. But their partner, Trey Miguel, has not been announced for this class. It hasn't been announced that Trey Miguel has signed with WWE. If anything, the absence of Trey Miguel is what everyone is really talking about when it comes to these latest Performance Center recruits. There's no word yet on if he signed with WWE, if he's in negotiations with WWE, if he's going to join Dez and Wentz in NXT. Nothing's really been said. There was talk that possibly Trey Miguel could possibly sign for AEW after the group left Impact last month. Of course, it was exclusively reported by Wrestling Inc. first that the group was heading to WWE. But it was certainly interesting and a big announcement that the Rascals have signed with WWE, at least Dez and Wentz have. But as I mentioned, no one really knows the situation right now when it comes to Trey Miguel. Now, here is WWE's announcement about Dez and Wentz. First, they announced that Devon Everhart Aiken, better known to fans as Dezmond Xavier, brings a dazzling array of aerial offense to the PC. Aiken, a 9-year veteran of the Squared Circle, has competed for promotions including Combat Zone Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and Impact Wrestling. They also talk about Wentz. They say Zachary Green, aka Zachary Wentz, is a frequent tag team partner of Aiken's. The 26-year-old Ohio native is also a former MMA fighter. Now, Triple H, WWE COO, the guy who oversees all of NXT, the founder of NXT, they like to call him, certainly the executive producer of NXT, has been doing a lot of media recently talking about NXT TakeOver War Games, which of course is Sunday. But he was asked during an interview with Fox Sports by Ryan Satin about his thoughts on the signing of Dez and Wentz of the Rascals and if he's been impressed with them. During the interview, Triple H gave his opinion about the former Impact stars. Now, according to Ryan Satin, we haven't had the full transcript of the interview, but he said on Twitter that Triple H said he was impressed with a lot of what Xavier and Wentz have accomplished so far. Satin tweeted, quote, regarding signing Dezmond, Xavier, Zachary Wentz, Triple H said he's impressed with a lot of what they've done so far, but I don't know that they've really had a lot of helping hand to help them get where they are. They've sort of figured it out on their own. Triple H also described the former Impact stars as two humble guys hungry for opportunity. Satin shared, quote, describes the Rascals as two humble guys hungry for opportunity, says they'll run through a brick wall, so to speak, to prove themselves, and it makes him want to do the same for them in return. So it looks like Triple H is very high on both Dez and Wentz in NXT. Of course he is. He signed them. Nobody gets signed to the WWE PC without Triple H's approval, so I'm sure Triple H is a big fan. To give someone like the Rascals essentially an open invitation or an open contract, whenever you're ready, sign the deal and you can come into the Performance Center. Obviously, it says that Triple H is a big fan and he desperately wanted the Rascals in NXT. So first of all, first and foremost, you have to say congratulations to Dez and Wentz for signing with WWE. It's a massive move in their career. It's what most people achieve to do in their pro wrestling career is sign with WWE. I know not everyone. I once said here on the channel that everyone dreams to end up in WWE and compete at WrestleMania, and people, rightfully so, actually corrected me and said, well, not everyone. There are the likes of Darby Allin, etc., Eddie Kingston, who that's not really their dream or anything like that. But for most people, when they get into pro wrestling, what did they watch growing up? They watched WWE. They watched Monday Night Raw. They watched SmackDown. So it's most people's aim and objective to one day step in a WWE ring, compete at WrestleMania. And for Dez and Wentz, it looks like that's going to happen. So congratulations to them. Certainly no surprise. Of course, it was, as I said, heavily reported when the Rascals left Impact Wrestling that there was this open offer from WWE and they were expected to sign with WWE. The biggest surprise when this announcement was made a couple of days ago was that no Trey Miguel, and the absence of Trey Miguel is what everyone's really talking about. But let's focus on Dez and Wentz first. Will they have success in NXT? Absolutely. I think it's almost a foregone conclusion. They're incredibly talented. They are a fantastic tag team. They were featured players in Impact Wrestling. Some of the matches they had in Impact Wrestling were absolutely insane. They are an incredible, incredible tag team. Some of the things that they are able to do in the ring as a tag team is incredible. They remind me a lot of the Motor City Machine Guns, mixed in a little bit with the Hardy Boys. They're high flyers. They are tremendous, tremendous athletes, and they are incredibly young. You see there that Zachary Wentz is only 26 years old. 26 years old in terms of pro wrestling. He is a baby. So to be in WWE right now, and with the environment and the style of work that NXT presents, they are going to be massive successes in NXT. I have no doubts in my mind about that. You look at the style of NXT, it's heavily influenced by the independent scene, with the high-flying nature of it, with the strong work ethic, flashy styles, lack of focus on promos, more of a focus on matches and storytelling told through matches, which favours the Rascals. So I have no doubt in my mind, like with most people, when they're signed from the independent scene, from Impact, from the independent scene, or wherever, I have no doubt in my mind they will be very, very successful in NXT. I would be stunned if they don't go through their entire NXT career without winning the NXT Tag Team Championships on at least one occasion. So I think they'll have great success on the Black and Gold brand. The issue is, will they have success on Raw and SmackDown? That is up in the air. I would love to say that if they have success in NXT, they'll have success on Raw and SmackDown. But unfortunately, we know it just doesn't work like that. There have been many a talented wrestler to come through to NXT, have success in NXT, and then have zero success on Raw or SmackDown, to have ultimate load success in NXT, and then be put on the sideline when they get to Raw or SmackDown, given a silly gimmick, had their character completely changed, have their gimmick completely changed, be switched from a babyface to a heel, or a heel to a babyface. Whatever made them popular, whatever made them successful in NXT is most of the time taken away from them when it comes to Raw and SmackDown. Just ask Keith Lee, just ask Matt Riddle, just ask The Revival, just ask Aleister Black, just ask Andrade. The list goes on and on and on. It's a Vince McMahon problem. I've said it so many times here on the channel, but I'll say it again here. It just proves to me that the NXT system, the WWE Performance Center system, does not work. It fundamentally does not work in WWE. The idea and the concept of the Performance Center and of NXT is to get talent ready for Raw and SmackDown. The aim was to have ready-made characters, ready-made personas, ready-made for Raw and SmackDown. There would be no difficult transition. There would be no issues with going from NXT to Raw or SmackDown. You would have ready-made, fully cultivated stars at your disposal all the time. And there would be never this gap in talent. There would never be this issue where, oh, we need new stars and we don't have them ready. There would never be that problem because they would be ready. That would be in NXT. Obviously, it doesn't work that way because every time a talent is called up to Raw and SmackDown, they're changed. Change, by its very nature, suggests that there is something wrong there, or there is something that Vince McMahon doesn't like or thinks that he can improve. If there is something wrong with the talent, that means NXT isn't doing it properly in the eyes of Vince McMahon. Now, in the eyes of everyone else, you would say that NXT does a fine job and it makes ready-made stars with ready-made gimmicks. However, for whatever reason, Vince McMahon decides that isn't the case and needs to change everything. Therefore, the system in NXT doesn't work, because if you have to make all these changes, are they really doing a good job in the first place? I don't know. That's my worry. So they could have fantastic success in NXT, but then they could do nothing on Raw or SmackDown. So I don't even know if I can predict that anymore, if they'll have success on Raw and SmackDown. They're amazingly talented athletes, fantastic wrestlers, but unfortunately in the past that hasn't been enough for very, very talented people, so we'll have to wait and see. What I will say when it comes to their signing with WWE is tag teams are greatly needed in WWE right now. That's across every single brand in WWE. That's on Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. Certainly in NXT we need tag teams right now. We've got Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch as tag team champions. We've got Breezango. There aren't a ton of tag teams, high quality tag teams in there. So Dez and Wentz can come straight in and go into the tag team title picture. They're just that good, and tag teams are just that needed. So from a tag team point of view in WWE and NXT, absolutely that's a big tick for WWE. They need tag teams. So if you're Dez and Wentz, you're going to be featured pretty quickly, I would think, in the tag team title picture, purely because they don't have many tag teams, and on top of that, they're a great tag team. I've seen some people suggesting, wow, the Rascals lost on the way out of Impact. Does it hurt their credibility in WWE? No, absolutely not. It doesn't. That's just pro wrestling. Whenever you're leaving the territory, you do the favors on the way out. You put over the new stars. You put over the promotion stars. You do the favors to help the company. That's pro wrestling 101. That is the time-honored tradition. It doesn't hurt them. They are incredibly talented professional wrestlers, and it's a huge signing for WWE, and Triple H knows that. Their ending, when it comes to Impact Wrestling, was incredibly emotional. And at the time, I think a lot of people thought, well, they're incredibly emotional because they're leaving a promotion where they've grown so much. They're leaving a promotion where really took a chance on them, and they're leaving a promotion of a group of friends and almost family that they really enjoy being around. But maybe this ending in Impact, this very emotional ending, takes on new connotations now, especially with the absence of the signing of Trey Miguel. We'll touch on that in a second. So why have Dez and Wentz signed with WWE? Of course, it's money. I think it's money and the dream, right? I mentioned it earlier, probably more the dream, but of course, their contract with WWE, it's a WWE contract. Even if it's an NXT contract, it's most likely going to be better money than Impact Wrestling. Not always the case. Of course, we know the Good Brothers, they're currently in Impact Wrestling, and they're on a very good deal. Maybe not as much as they were on in WWE. Nevertheless, it's the good deal, and Impact can, especially being owned by Anthem, they can give good deals. But I'm sure the Rascals probably are on better money than they were on Impact. And most importantly, as I mentioned, it's the dream. It's the dream of most young professional wrestlers to go to the big show, go to the big stage, go to WWE, eventually wrestle on Monday Night Raw, the same show you watched as a kid, wrestle on SmackDown, wrestle some of the biggest names in the world, whether it is Roman Reigns, Drew McIntyre, Randy Orton, Triple H, if he ever wrestles again, those kind of big names, John Cena when he comes back, those big names, and appearing on a WrestleMania and a SummerSlam, appearing in the Royal Rumble. That's what people dreamed of as a kid, right? And Zachary Wentz 25, Dezmond Xavier's around the same age, I believe. It's their dream. It's their dream of most young people to perform in WWE and on the big stage. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why they signed with WWE. Concern I would have if I were them, given that they are a tag team, given that they've kind of made their name as a tag team, and in a faction with Trey Miguel, is tag teams historically don't last long in WWE. That is a fact. Most tag teams at this point in WWE, it's not about winning the tag titles, it's not about having great tag team matches or having great tag team moves. It is just a countdown until a matter of time before you're split up. So I wouldn't be stunned in the slightest if at some point in the future Dez and Wentz are split up during their WWE career, because it's just how it works in WWE. Name a tag team in WWE history that hasn't been split up. You will struggle to find it. A tag team that's been there a while. I think FTR probably left because one of those reasons. Most tag teams in WWE, they split up. Why? Because it's not a priority for WWE. It just isn't a priority for them. Tag team wrestling never really has been a priority. Even at the heights of when tag team wrestling does have a focus in WWE, it doesn't last that long. Vince McMahon gets tired and doesn't want to do the focus on tag team wrestling, gets bored and goes on to something else. So that is probably a roadblock for the Rascals in WWE during their run, is that tag team wrestling goes in and out of vogue so quickly in WWE in the mind of Vince McMahon. It's difficult to stay relevant as a tag team because it's just not a priority in WWE. So it's kind of a shame, I think, when you realise that they left Impact Wrestling, because obviously this working relationship now with Impact and AEW has just come into effect. And if they had have stayed with Impact Wrestling, then potentially you had all of these amazing matches that were potentially on the cards between some AEW tag teams that could have faced off against the Rascals now that this working relationship is in effect. Or if, of course, the Rascals signed with AEW, they could have had this plethora of tag teams to face off against. I mean, the AEW tag team division, I think, goes without saying, is probably the best tag team division in the world. That's not hyperbole. I mean, it really is. Look at the talent they have. You could have had the Rascals facing off against the Young Bucks, FTR, Best Friends, SCU, Jurassic Express, Top Flight, The Acclaimed, The Dark Order, Blade and the Butcher, the Lucha Brothers. It goes on and on. You could have had absolute classic tag team matches, and tag team wrestling is just fundamentally better in AEW than it is in WWE. Why? Because it's a priority. It's a priority, and unfortunately the Rascals are going into a company where tag team wrestling just isn't important. It isn't priority. It isn't featured. You will never main event a pay-per-view in WWE with a tag team match. You might not in AEW, but you'll certainly be a featured match, and you can go 30 minutes, you can go 40 minutes in AEW in a tag team match, unless you are two main event tag teams, that are filled with legit main event singles guys. It ain't going to happen in WWE. It just isn't. If you want to get to the main event, if you want to get to the big stage in WWE, it's as a single star, and as a tag team, you'll get split up on the way there. The days of having teams like the Hardys, the Dudley Boys, Edge and Christian, New Age Outlaws, etc., big tag teams in main events, featured spots, it just isn't happening. I feel like that kind of happened by mistake when it comes to WWE. They were just too talented that it kind of forced the issue. And you look at all of those tag teams, the Hardys, the Dudleys, Ed and Christian, New Age Outlaws, the name I mentioned there, they all got split up in the end. And it kind of reaffirms my point there when it comes to the Rascals. They will get split up eventually. It's just a matter of time. Why? Because tag team wrestling isn't featured. That's why FTR left. FTR won every tag team championship available in WWE in the course of a couple of years. Why? Because WWE was desperate to make them stay. And two, there was no other tag teams to face because they were split up all the time. So, maybe the Rascals could have success by that point of view, just by proxy, because there's no other tag teams to face. I don't know. AEW, of course, does have the best tag team in the world, but the dream is to be in WWE for most people, and you can't blame the Rascals for signing a contract. You have to be happy for them and congratulate them, and I do. And like I said, the money is good, I'm sure, and it's going to be better than Impact. You're obviously going to be working more dates than you do in Impact. With Impact, you might work 5 dates a month, and that might just be one television taping for 5 days and maybe a pay-per-view every quarter. Whereas WWE, I don't think the live event schedule was ever going to get back to what it used to before, but you'll obviously be working every day at the Performance Center and then live events and everything like that as well. So you'll be working on the USA Network, greater exposure than you'll have on Access TV and eventually on Raw or SmackDown, on USA and maybe even Fox. It makes a ton of sense. How long will Dez and Wentz stay in NXT? If I was giving them advice, I would say no rush. Because one, you want to make your name for yourself in NXT. I think these are young guys. They can get a couple of years in NXT if they really want to. And I don't think it would hurt them in the slightest. Why would you want to go to Raw or SmackDown as a tag team at the moment? You just wouldn't. I don't think you would. When it comes to Raw or SmackDown, what are the main reasons for going there as a tag team right now? It would just be exposure and probably an improved contract. Apart from that, you're not going to be featured on the show that much. Certainly in a better position than you would be in NXT. You've got a much better chance of main event in NXT as a tag team than you do a Raw or SmackDown, that's for sure. So, you have to balance that up, with an improving of matches and exposure, plus the money on the main roster, obviously being wrestling in front of a wider audience. But once you go to Raw or SmackDown, man, that's when the politics and the creative comes into effect, and that politics and creative team when it comes to Raw or SmackDown can just be, horrendous. Look at some of the shows, look at some of the gimmicks, some of the matches, look at some of the things that's happened to these NXT talents when they've come up to Raw or SmackDown. Do you remember the Viking Experience? Exactly. They were a tag team that dominated NXT. Next thing you know, when they're called up to Raw, they're the Viking Experience and they're eating chicken legs. What do I need to say more? When it comes to their gimmick, I guess with the Rascals, you do have to question, are they going to do the 420 stuff that they did in Impact Wrestling? Are they going to do that in WWE and NXT? Quite frankly, I would be stunned. I would be stunned if they were allowed to do that. People in the past, like RVD and Matt Riddle, they weren't allowed to do it. So I can't believe that the Rascals would be allowed to play on that kind of stuff like they did in Impact. I suppose, given it's 2020, attitudes towards that kind of thing have changed. Nevertheless, you still are with a publicly traded company that do their very, 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 very best to toe the line, even though they don't. But they do their very, very, very best to toe the line. So I would be surprised if they were allowed to do that kind of gimmick in WWE. But speaking of Trey Miguel, let's talk about Trey Miguel, because that is the thing that everyone is talking about when it comes to the Rascals right now. Is the Rascals have signed to WWE. They are in NXT. They are at the Performance Center. What's going on with Trey Miguel? Where is Trey Miguel? Why wasn't Trey Miguel announced with this group of athletes at the Performance Center? There are several reasons. Obviously, why Trey Miguel wasn't announced in that in that press release. Why? Maybe because he hasn't come to terms. I think the most likely one is he hasn't signed anything. He obviously hasn't signed with WWE yet. Maybe he hasn't come to terms. Maybe if he has signed with WWE, they're keeping him as a surprise for TakeOver. That is on Sunday. He is the biggest star out of the three members of the Rascals. He's the singles guy. You've got Dez and Wentz as tag team. Trey Miguel is more of a main event kind of star. He competed in the main event at Slammiversary. He's the biggest star out of them, so it would kind of make sense to keep him as a surprise. But at this point, looking at WWE's recent history when it comes to announcing these signings, WWE doesn't tend to really sign many people anymore and not announce it. I mean, even Karrion Kross, who got, the most monster of monster pushes in NXT, they even announced him as part of a PC class intake. So I don't think they would do that kind of special treatment for Trey Miguel, quite frankly. So I think it's the most likely scenario here is that Trey Miguel hasn't come to terms with WWE, hence they haven't announced that he was signed. Or maybe even more likely, maybe he's signed with AEW or he's going to sign with AEW. Just because there was an open offer from WWE, it doesn't mean there wasn't a contrasting offer from AEW too. Which is slightly confusing that both parties would accept that. It kind of confuses me that Dez and Wentz would agree to go to WWE and Trey Miguel would choose to go to AEW, because I think as a promotion, you want them as a trio. I think from the perspective of the wrestlers themselves, they would want to stay together. You want all three of them. They come together. They're a package, right? And that's not to say that Trey Miguel is worthless without Dez and Wentz, and that's not to say that Dez and Wentz are worthless without Trey Miguel, because that's not the case. But something just doesn't feel right not to have them all together in one company. But going back to their ending in Impact Wrestling, like I touched on earlier, it certainly would explain why it was so emotional in their departure from Impact Wrestling. If you go back and watch that final episode of them on Impact, there was tears, but there was serious tears. There wasn't. Looking back on it, everyone felt at the time when they were probably just emotional. They're leaving Impact. They're emotional because they've grown so much. This was a company that believed in them. They've got a ton of friends there. It's like a family there. They don't want to leave, but it's the right time, blah, blah, blah. I think people thought that at the time. Now when you look back on it with hindsight, which is of course a wonderful thing, you start to think, were they emotional because they were leaving Impact, or were they emotional because it was possibly their last match as a team? Was it the last time that they were in the same company together? Because if they're going off in different directions and they're like a brotherhood, it would certainly explain why they were so emotional. It would certainly explain a few things. So if I had to guess about Trey Miguel right now, I would probably say he goes to AEW. If he does go to AEW, where does he fit? I don't think he's ready for the main event yet. I don't think he's going to go straight into a World Championship shot or anything like that. I think Trey Miguel right now, when it comes to AEW, I think he slots right into that TNT Championship picture. I would love to see him face off against the likes of Darby Allin, Ricky Starks, Sammy Guevara, Cody Rhodes, Lance Archer, Brian Cage, Will Hobbs. I think that's the kind of opponent maybe Trey Miguel looks at when it comes to an AEW run. I think he would do fantastic there. Obviously, it's still possible he could sign with WWE. It might just be a case of the negotiations for him are taking a little bit longer. I just think if that was the case, they would hold off the announcement of Dez and Wentz and wait for Trey Miguel to come in. Something feels a bit off. Something feels a bit off there. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see. Maybe he's just assessing his options right now. Maybe he hasn't signed with AEW. Maybe he hasn't signed with WWE. He's just weighing things up, and anything can happen in the future. Anything can and will happen. If 2020 has taught us anything, anything can and will happen, especially in the world of pro wrestling. So we'll have to wait and see. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on the Rascals signing with WWE, and where do you think Trey Miguel will end up signing? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, chatting about Impact, WWE, AEW here on the channel. So be sure to leave a comment below and I'll do my best to respond and reply. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.